Welcome back, everyone. Ready for another deep dive? Today, we're tackling the Ottoman Empire.
An empire that really did have it all.
Exactly.
Yeah.
From, like, a small frontier state to a huge global power and, well, back again.
Yeah.
All in just over 600 years.
6 centuries of history. It's remarkable.
Wild, right. So for this one, our main guide is an article called The Decline and Fall of the Ottoman Empire.
It's a classic. And really gets to the heart of the story.
It does. And for all of you listening, we're going to try to condense all that history.
Pull out the most interesting bits.
The good stuff. So, even if you only have, 10, 15 minutes, you can get
A crash course in the Ottomans.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think one of the coolest things about them is,
Well, they were a huge EE.
yeah, at their peak,
They controlled territory.
from southeastern Europe
To Middle East.
and even parts of
North Africa.
Yeah, come on. They were a major force.
They were the force for a long time.
And, of course, we can't talk about the Ottomans without mentioning,
Suleiman the Magnificent.
Suleiman. What a name.
It's iconic. And he lived up to the title.
Yeah. He led them during their, golden age.
The 16th and 17th centuries. That was their peak.
Yeah. They were dominating the Mediterranean, shaping global trade.
Real power players on the world stage.
But, of course, every empire has its
Ups and downs.
rise and fall.
And for the Ottomans, that decline, it's really interesting to unpack.
Okay, so take us back then. They start as this small frontier state in, the 13th century?
That's right. Around 1299. Pretty humble beginnings.
But then they just explode onto the scene.
Right. So what's the secret sauce? Well, part of it was their military.
Ah, so they were, skilled warriors.
Oh, yeah. They were known for their discipline,
Okay.
their tactics, their leadership. They were really effective.
And that allowed them to just, conquer and expand rapidly.
Exactly. And they were also very good at consolidating their gains. They weren't just raiding and pillaging. They were building an empire. So it wasn't just about military might. It was also about administration.
Ah, so organization, governance, all that.
Yep. They were good at integrating new territories, incorporating diverse populations.
So they weren't just, conquering for the sake of conquering. They had a system.
Precisely. And that system, for a while, it worked really well.
Right. But then, like you said, there's this decline. And by the 18th century, the Ottomans are being called...
The sick man of Europe.
Ooh, that's not a good nickname.
Not at all. It reflected this perception that they were, weak, declining.
Falling behind.
Yeah. And they were facing a lot of problems.
Okay, so, what went wrong? They were so powerful for so long.
Well, it's complex, but let's start with their military.
Okay, the thing that made them great to begin with.
Right. But as Europe advanced, the Ottomans, they kind of struggled to keep up.
Technologically.
Yeah, exactly. They were slow to adopt gunpowder technology, new naval strategies, things like that.
So they kind of got stuck in the past while everyone else was, moving forward.
In a way, yes. And this resistance to change, it wasn't just in the military.
Oh, interesting.
They were facing economic challenges, too.
Okay.
Their traditional feudal system, it was being disrupted by European economic influences, new trade patterns, new financial systems. And the Ottomans, they were hesitant to adapt.
So kind of like a double whammy. Internal struggles plus external pressures.
Exactly. A perfect storm brewing.
But, they didn't just, sit back and watch the empire crumble. They tried to reform, didn't they?
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
They weren't just passive. There were attempts to turn things around. In fact, in the late 18th century, Sultan Selim III, he initiated a whole bunch of reforms.
Okay, what kind of reforms?
Well, he focused on stabilizing finances,
Makes sense.
modernizing the army,
Catching up with the times.
and even tried to reform the Janissaries.
The Janissaries.
Yeah. They were the elite infantry units.
Like the special forces of their day.
Exactly. But they had become incredibly powerful
Okay.
and very resistant to change.
Ah, so reforming them, that must have been like walking a tightrope.
It was. And it didn't go so well for Selim III.
Yeah, I can imagine. So tell me, did these reforms, did they work? Did they save the empire?
Well, sadly, no, not in the long run.
Oh.
Selim III's reforms, they ultimately failed. He was deposed in a coup.
Wow.
And the Janissaries, they continued to exert their influence.
So they were really stuck in their ways.
They were. But Selim's efforts, they weren't completely in vain. They showed that some people at least recognized the need for change.
Right. So the seeds were planted, even if they didn't fully bloom at that time.
Exactly.
But then things got even more complicated in the 19th century.
Oh, yeah. The 19th century, that was a whole new ballgame. Nationalism was on the rise.
Ah, so everyone wanted their own country.
Pretty much. And the Ottoman Empire with its vast, diverse population.
All those different ethnicities, religions.
It made them incredibly vulnerable to these nationalist movements.
So while they're trying to modernize, they're also dealing with this internal pressure, like pulling them apart.
Exactly. It was a recipe for instability.
And I bet the European powers weren't just sitting around watching this happen, right?
Oh, definitely not. They were like vultures circling.
Okay, so walk me through that. What were they up to?
Well, they saw the Ottoman Empire weakening.
A chance to grab some power.
Exactly. Russia, France, Britain, they all had their own interests in the region.
And they were all trying to, position themselves to benefit from the Ottomans' decline.
That's it in a nutshell. It's often called the Eastern Question. How to divide up the Ottoman pie, essentially.
So the Ottomans are dealing with internal instability, nationalist uprisings, and European powers trying to carve them up.
That's the situation.
Talk about a multi-layered crisis.
It was, and it pushed them further and further toward collapse.
But before we get to that, there's one more group we got to talk about, right? The Young Turks.
Ah, yes. The Young Turks. They were a fascinating bunch.
They were reformers, right, trying to save the empire from within.
Exactly. They emerged in the late 19th century.
And they believed that drastic change was needed?
Radical change. They were intellectuals, military officers, government officials.
A real mix of people.
And they all agreed. The Ottoman Empire was in trouble and it needed a serious overhaul.
So what do they do? How do they try to change things?
Well, their most dramatic move was in 1908.
Okay.
They overthrew the Sultan.
Whoa.
Sultan Abdulhamid II forced him to accept a constitution.
So they were, pushing for a more modern democratic system.
Exactly. They wanted a more representative government.
Modernizing the military.
Improving education. Promoting economic development.
Wow. Big changes.
They were trying to drag the Ottoman Empire kicking and screaming into the 20th century.
Ambitious, to say the least. But how did people react? I mean, was everyone on board with this?
Oh, not at all.
There was pushback.
Definitely. The Young Turks, they faced a lot of opposition. Traditionalists, religious leaders.
People who wanted to hold on to the old ways.
Exactly. They feared the erosion of traditional values, the influence of the West.
So even though the Young Turks had good intentions, it wasn't an easy road.
Not at all. The empire was deeply divided.
Caught between the past and the future.
That's a good way to put it. And then, of course, World War I broke out.
And I'm guessing that didn't help matters.
It was a devastating blow, the final nail in the coffin, you could say.
So they ended up on the losing side.
They did. They allied with the Central Powers.
Germany, Austria, Hungary.
Yep. A disastrous decision.
It sounds like the end was pretty brutal.
It was. They suffered heavy losses.
Their territory was occupied.
The once mighty Ottoman Empire was on the brink of collapse.
Wow, what a story.
It's a tragic end to a long and complex history.
But, like you mentioned earlier, a new chapter was about to begin, right? With the rise of Mustafa Kemal Ataturk.
That's right. And that's a story for our next installment.
Okay, everyone, stay tuned. We'll be right back after a short break. Okay, so we've seen this empire rise to incredible heights and then face this long, complex decline.
Full of internal struggles, external pressures.
Yeah, and ending with defeat in World War I.
But as we mentioned, there's this new chapter about to begin.
Right, with Mustafa Kemal Ataturk.
Now, Ataturk's story, it's really fascinating.
He's a figure you hear a lot about when you're talking about, modern Turkey.
He was a military commander who rose to prominence during World War I.
Okay.
And he refused to just accept the empire's demise.
He was like, nope, not going to happen.
Exactly. He became a symbol of resistance against the Allied occupation.
So he wasn't just a military leader.
No, he was much more than that.
He was a nation builder.
Precisely. Ataturk was key in that whole transition from the Ottoman Empire to the Republic of Turkey.
Right.
He led the fight for independence, negotiated with the Allied powers.
So he was a diplomat, too.
You could say that, yeah.
Wow, what a resume.
And then, on November 1st, 1922, he officially abolished the Ottoman Sultanate.
Wow, that's a big deal.
It marked the end of over 6 centuries of Ottoman rule.
The end of an era.
Truly.
But he wasn't just about dismantling the old system, right?
Right. Ataturk had this vision
for a new Turkey.
A modern Turkey.
What were some of the key changes he made?
Well, he was a revolutionary,
Okay.
He truly believed that To succeed in the modern world, Turkey needed a complete transformation.
A complete overhaul.
Yeah, he implemented these sweeping reforms that touched upon like every aspect of Turkish society.
I mean, where do you even begin with something like that?
Well, one of his main focuses was secularization.
Secularization.
Separating religion from the state.
Oh, wait.
He believed that was essential for modernization.
Interesting.
So this meant abolishing the caliphate.
The caliphate.
Yeah, it had been a symbol of Islamic authority for centuries.
Right.
And he dismantled religious courts and schools.
Wow, that must have been a huge shift.
It was, I mean, for a country that had been so closely tied to Islam for so long,
Yeah.
it was a radical change.
How did people react to that?
There was resistance, of course.
Yeah.
Many saw it as an attack on their faith and traditions.
Understandably.
But Ataturk, he was determined to create this modern secular republic.
Right.
He replaced Islamic law with a secular legal system.
Okay.
And promoted a more westernized outlook.
It sounds like he was really breaking away from the Ottoman past.
Trying to forge a new national identity.
Right.
And it wasn't just about secularization. He also focused on social change.
Like what?
Particularly women's rights.
Okay.
He granted women the right to vote, to hold public office.
Wow.
Encouraged them to join the workforce.
Big changes.
He even challenged traditional dress codes.
Really?
Yeah, urging both men and women to adopt Western attire.
It's interesting how these reforms, they reflect this broader shift in societal norms.
Right. Like he was fast-forwarding Turkey into the 20th century.
Yeah, challenging centuries-old customs.
Exactly.
So he's tackling secularization, social change, what else?
Well, he also saw education as key to progress.
Makes sense.
So he introduced a new alphabet for the Turkish language.
A new alphabet?
Yeah, a Latin-based one.
Wow.
To increase literacy rates, facilitate the adoption of Western knowledge and technology.
Right.
And he reformed the education system, putting an emphasis on secular and scientific principles.
So he was attacking this on multiple fronts.
He was.
But these changes, they must have come with challenges, right?
Oh, absolutely. Transforming an entire society is never easy.
Yeah.
Ataturk faced opposition from all sides.
I can imagine. Some saw his reforms as too radical, a betrayal of traditional values.
So even though the Ottoman Empire was officially gone,
Its legacy, the weight of tradition.
it still had an influence
Oh, absolutely.
on the new Turkey.
You can't just erase centuries of history overnight.
Right.
The Ottoman Empire's influence, it was still felt.
Not just in Turkey, throughout the Middle East, Southeast Europe.
It's a reminder that history isn't just about past events.
It's about understanding the forces that shape the world we live in today.
Right.
The Ottoman story, with all its complexities and contradictions,
Yeah,
it still resonates with us today.
it does.
And Ataturk's efforts to forge this new path for Turkey, while dealing with that Ottoman legacy,
Yeah.
it offers valuable insights into the challenges of nation building and societal transformation.
So we've talked about the decline of the Ottomans, the rise of Ataturk, his ambitious reforms.
It's a lot of information.
What would you say are the most important takeaways for understanding this period?
Well, I think it's crucial to remember that the Ottoman Empire story is not a simple rise and fall.
Right. It's more nuanced than that.
It was this dynamic civilization that lasted for centuries
Yeah.
and left behind a rich and complex legacy.
History is rarely black and white.
Exactly. There are always shades of gray, different perspectives.
Unintended consequences.
Right.
The Ottoman story highlights those challenges of adapting to a changing world.
Their decline, it wasn't just about bad leadership or poor decisions.
This is more complex than that.
It was this interplay of internal and external factors.
Like what?
Economic shifts, technological advancements, the rise of nationalism.
The European powers meddling.
All of that contributed
It's also kind of a cautionary tale, isn't it?
about
The dangers of clinging to outdated systems, resisting change.
Oh, absolutely. The Ottomans, in many ways, they were slow to adapt to this shifting global landscape.
Yeah.
The reluctance to fully embrace modernization, especially in, like, military technology and economic reform.
It contributed to their decline.
It did.
But then on the other hand, you have Ataturk.
Right.
His efforts to create this new Turkey,
It shows the power of visionary leadership.
even when facing huge challenges.
Exactly.
Ataturk's story is like, even in the ruins of a fallen empire.
There's potential for renewal, reinvention.
It's a fascinating paradox, isn't it?
The end of one era giving birth to another.
And the Ottoman Empire, even though it ultimately collapsed.
It continues to shape our understanding of history, culture, politics.
In the region and beyond,
It does.
it's a reminder that even the most powerful empires,
They're not immune to change.
And that adaptability.
It's key to survival.
Well said. And on that note, we've reached the end of part 2 of our deep dive
into the Ottoman Empire.
It's been quite a journey so far.
We've explored their rise, their fall, their cultural contributions, their lasting impact.
And in our final part, we'll be examining how the Ottomans are viewed by historians today.
And what lessons their story holds for us in the 21st century.
So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back after a quick break. All right, we're back. So, we've really covered a lot in this deep dive into the Ottoman Empire.
Yeah, we've gone from their humble beginnings all the way to their peak as this global powerhouse.
And, of course, their eventual decline and collapse.
Right, and we even talked about how, their legacy kind of continues to shape the world today.
It's pretty amazing to think about a civilization that's been gone for almost a century, but still has this, profound impact on us. I'm kind of curious, how do historians, generally view the Ottomans today?
Oh, that's a great question. For a long time, the main narrative, it really focused on that sick man of Europe image.
Right.
Emphasizing the decline, the fall. But I think more recently, historians have started to, re-examine that whole period.
Okay, so looking at it with fresh eyes.
Exactly. They're taking a more holistic view.
Looking at the whole picture.
Yeah, and there's this growing appreciation for their accomplishments in things like art.
Oh, right.
Architecture, law, administration. I mean, they were a multicultural empire,
Yeah.
And their system, it was pretty tolerant for its time, especially when you consider different religions, ethnicities.
Yeah, that's a really important point, especially today.
Right.
When we see so much conflict based on those things. It's kind of like, the Ottomans offer this historical example of coexistence.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't perfect. But their approach to managing diversity in such a huge empire, I think it holds some valuable lessons.
So, what were they doing specifically?
Well, they had this system of millets, which basically gave different religious communities some autonomy.
So they could, manage their own affairs?
Exactly. It allowed for a certain level of pluralism, religious and cultural. Pretty unusual for back then.
Yeah, definitely. So as we kind of wrap up our deep dive here, what are some of the big takeaways you hope our listeners will remember?
Well, I think first and foremost, the Ottoman story reminds us that history is nuanced.
It's not always black and white.
Right. It's not just heroes and villains or this straightforward story of progress and decline.
Right.
The Ottomans, like any empire, they were complex. Triumphs and failures, innovation, stagnation.
Yeah, they had it all.
They did.
It's a good reminder to approach history with a critical eye.
Definitely. Don't just accept the simplified versions. Dig deeper.
I think their experience also gives us some insights into, the dynamics of power, right?
Oh, yeah. The challenges of reform, the legacies of the past. I mean, their story shows how even the mightiest empires can fall.
To the forces of change.
And that adaptability, it's really key to survival.
Well said. Well, folks, on that note, we've come to the end of our deep dive into the Ottoman Empire. It's been quite a journey, hasn't it?
It has. From those early beginnings to Suleiman the Magnificent to the collapse and the rise of modern Turkey.
We've covered centuries of history, culture, politics, and I hope you found it as fascinating as we have.
Me too. And if this has sparked your curiosity, I encourage you to, keep learning.
Yeah. There are tons of books, articles, documentaries out there. And as you explore, just keep in mind all those complexities we talked about today.
Right. The successes, the failures, the strengths, the weaknesses. What can we learn from them?
It's all about asking questions,
And thinking critically.
Exactly. And on that thought-provoking note, we'll wrap up this episode of The Deep Dive.
Until next time, keep exploring.
Keep questioning.
And keep diving deep into the fascinating world of history.
See y'all next time.